Welcome everybody to the Mr. Boxing Guru podcast. It is me, Sal. Again, Mr. Boxing Guru. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Enough time to think about what just happened, the fight that we actually had, and most importantly, enjoy the great Manny Pacquiao. And of course, the fight that I'm talking about is the Manny Pacquiao's defeat on the hands of Ugas, Ugas el Cubano. Interesting fight. We'll get to that a little later, but it's kind of, this is one of those fights where it's a little odd from me, because I don't think I was one of the ones that appreciated Manny Pacquiao. You know how people always say that you don't appreciate a fighter, or a fighter doesn't become a legend till he's gone. In my personal case, this is kind of how I feel about Manny Pacquiao now. Manny Pacquiao, it's an interesting fighter, because I don't think we will ever see a fighter like that. At least at my age, I'm 40, about to be 41 in 2-3 days. But I don't think that fighter is born yet that has the abilities of Manny Pacquiao, the charisma, the overall persona, the overall speed, the overall just awkwardness that was Manny Pacquiao. And I think it's not a bad idea to talk a little bit more about what happened. So, as we all know, Ugas beat Manny Pacquiao, but it's on paper it looks okay. This Cuban guy came and just beat Manny Pacquiao. I get it. Manny hadn't fought in 2 years. Last time Manny fought was what was it? Keith Thurman. That was 2019, I believe. And before that, I believe it was Adrian Broner. Again, relatively easy fight to score. I think the Keith Thurman is even easier to score. But again, this is an older Manny Pacquiao. Remember, we got to think about who Manny Pacquiao really was. Manny Pacquiao was that guy that came from the lower weights and was able to do so much in the lower weights that, I'm sorry, he was able to do so much as a welterweight that we tend to forget what he did with the lighter weights. We forget the Barrera fights that were just an absolute gem. We forget that as Mexicans or Mexican Americans, we tend to claim that we don't quit, or that our Mexican fighters don't quit, but we tend to forget that he made Morales quit on his very last fight. And this is Morales. Morales, I get it, he was already old, but again, old in Mexican years, I guess you could say. You could also say that Manny was old at that point. This was ages ago. What was this fight, like at 126, maybe 130? The fights that he had was with Marquez. I mean, look at the type of fighter that Manny Pacquiao is, or was, or who knows if he's still fighting. He's still going to continue to fight. I really hope not, but he beat Marquez 3 times, and they were all very tight, very, very close fights. That he always felt that there was a need to redo it again, because there was a doubt. Somebody doubted him beating the great Marquez, and Marquez is as good as he is. Without Manny Pacquiao, I'm sorry, but Marquez ain't shit. He continued to give a shot until Marquez finally redeemed himself, and he was able to put out Manny Pacquiao, which at that point we all thought it was done, or it was a career. We won't see Manny Pacquiao again, because he got knocked out in a type of knockout that you really do not recover from. But what has Pacquiao done? He's continued to evolve. He's continued to fight. He's continued to almost reinvent himself at the same time as becoming a politician in his home country. And it's different with Manny, because again, his wins just hits different, because we've always compared him to Floyd. Personally, I thought he was a bigger boxing persona, or helped boxing. It helped the imagination of boxing more than Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather again is an absolute great fighter. I get it. Undefeated. That's his thing. Perfect. But in my opinion, Floyd was always an opportunistic fighter, which, he always knew what type of fighter he was going to fight. He always knew the weaknesses in the fighter, and therefore, when it came down to fight these type of fighters, the Cottos, the whoever you want to call it, whoever the hell Floyd fought, there's always going to be a question mark on those wins. Not whether how did he win or not. It's just the type of opponents he was facing at that time, whether it was Pacquiao already beating him or the way Pacquiao beat him. And that's the main difference. Again, you grab fighters like the way Manny Pacquiao did Cotto. I remember when Manny Pacquiao fought Cotto, I said, no way is this smaller guy's going to be able to bang with a guy that was an absolute monster at 140 pounds, much less at 147. Yes, Manny Pacquiao did weight drain him a bit, but still, it was a fight. In my opinion, you know what, Manny Pacquiao's going to go in there, he's going to move around, he's going to make Cotto miss, and he's just going to start darting in and out. But no, on the contrary, Manny Pacquiao went in there and actually fought Cotto, how he likes to say, to, and he did great at it. He beat the shit out of fucking Cotto. He literally beat the shit out of Cotto. And again, this fight was after Cotto's, after beating Hatton, so he was already in a row. And even before that, that's when my dislike almost happened with Manny Pacquiao, because like you guys know, I'm a huge fan of Oscar De La Hoya, and what Manny Pacquiao did to Oscar De La Hoya was to me back then was such a fucking disrespectful, because he utterly beat the shit out of Oscar. And Oscar had no comeback. He had no. We could blame everything that we can. Back then, it was a deer meat. Manny Pacquiao was just a fucking monster. It was something that we had never seen. It was something awkward, something that you can't find sparring for, because how do you spar for how do you find sparring partners when your opponent is a Tasmanian devil? It doesn't make sense. Again, even before that, again, the David Diaz fight, again, the Marquez fight, the Marc Antonio Barrera, and I'm just going back, and you're seeing all the legends he's fighting. Morales, again, Oscar Larios, again, Morales, again, it's just so many back-to-back wars with Morales, again, and just to the point where he actually got to fight Oscar De La Hoya, and then, like I mentioned earlier, let me kind of go forward to go back. Then he went in, like I said, mentioned Ricky Hatton, which was a common opponent with Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather, again, he did what he does best. He outworked you. He out-hustled you. He got him tired, and by the time, he was done, Ricky Hatton was done, that's when he fell, and he was able to land that infamous check hook that everybody was so fond of Floyd's. Again, but look how Manny just utterly starched a guy like Ricky Hatton. Ricky Hatton was solid. Let's admit it. He was a solid fighter. But again, it's the way Manny Pacquiao just destroyed his opponents. Oscar De La Hoya versus Manny Pacquiao. It was an utter fucking beatdown. It's still fucking. I still remember watching this fight. I believe it was a bicycle casino here in Bell Gardens. I believe it was me and my wife, and it was. I think I fucking cried that day. I'm not gonna lie. Again, going back to the Miguel Cotto fight, giving guys the opportunity like Joshua Clottey to fight a guy like Joshua Clottey was insane. Who wanted to fight Joshua Clottey? Who did it? Manny Pacquiao. Where at the Cowboy Stadium, whatever, AT&T Stadium, whatever it's called now. And I don't know if you guys remember that fight, but it was actually that double fist that Clottey had this one winky rightish kind of defense where he had just as long as arms and bending his hands from his elbow to the top of the glove. It almost seemed like he covered his whole torso, which was kind of weird. So everybody knew that was a little hard to get into, at least be able to punch, because again, he just pretty much covered his whole body with, from his forearm, from his elbow, to all the way to the end of that glove. So what Manny Pacquiao ended up doing, just to try to loosen him up, he actually threw a double punch. To try to hit him around, and of course he got in trouble with the ref, blah blah blah. We all know the story. That was Joshua Clottey. And then after after before that, again off of separate bouts, so separate opponents, Cotto and Margarito had gone at it. Of course, at this point, Margarito is the most evil guy in the world because something about with the hand wraps. And actually, no, I'm sorry, this wasn't before. This was before the hand wraps. So. No, actually, I'm sorry. This was after the hand wraps. He's the bad guy. And this is where I think Manny kind of the human Manny started coming out as far into boxing, because he did all this damage again at welterweight to Miguel Cotto, Ricky Hatton, Oscar De La Hoya, Joshua Clottey. Again, he does all this damage right so far. And then he says, fuck it, I want to go up a higher weight. So he goes and fights Antonio Margarito. And at this point, he fought Margarito, at 152? It was for 154, of course, like we all know. Super welterweight is 154, but I believe he fought Margarito at 152. That was the thing with Manny. He was a king of catchweights. And I believe this is all Bob Arum trying to get his guy an advantage, which I get. But again, he fights Margarito. And again, Margarito, if we all knew, he did, as long as he landed one, he didn't care receiving five, and that's how the fight was. Manny was, darting in and out, and then to Margarito, so, pa, pa, pa. So Margarito started getting to Manny Pacquiao to the body, but the fact of the matter is that by the time that it was all said and done, I mean, it looked like Margarito's eye was pretty much hanging out. And at that point, I believe it was like in the 9th, 10th round. Again, I'm not watching the fight, so I'm just going based on memory. Something switched in Manny Pacquiao where he felt like, okay, I'm just beating the shit out of this guy. This guy is obviously not going to go down. But something switched where Manny decided to box a little more. And in my opinion, from there on, from that Margarito fight, it's been a different Manny. One, of course, he found religion. He stopped drinking Hennessy and the hookers and whatever. But he just became a different fighter. Again, still aggressive, still the Tasmanian Devil, but became a little different. This was in 2010. This was, again, after Manny being the smaller guy. Then Manny... being at these welterweight fights for 2 years now as a full-fledged welterweight, and then it goes up to 152 pounds and fights Margarito. He changes a little. He decides to box. He couldn't destroy a very durable guy in Margarito, and he switched it up just a bit where he decided, in my opinion, to let his opponents breathe a little more. And after the Margarito fight, again, I think Margarito's eye was completely gone. So that was that. Then after that, he fought Shane Mosley. Shane Mosley, again, still a solid fighter, big fighter, fast fighter. Mosley couldn't handle the speed. Mosley didn't even know where the fuck Manny Pacquiao was. Shane Mosley ended up fighting to survive most of that fight. He won it out. I remember at some point Shane Mosley going to brother Nassim Richardson's fight, corner, and winning out. He won it out. I know he won it out of the fight, but somehow he was convinced to stay in there. Again, it was all survival for him. After that, of course, we saw him again do the fought Marquez, and again, here we go again. He ended up fighting Marquez. That was odd. Timothy Bradley was an interesting fight in the Manny Pacquiao saga, because a lot of people would think that Manny Pacquiao won. I personally had it a draw. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Again, it could have been my distaste for Manny Pacquiao this time, because again, remember, if we kind of go back, we remember that my love for Manny Pacquiao wasn't that great after the beatdown that he gave Oscar De La Hoya. So I gave the fight versus Timothy Bradley a draw. Timothy Bradley received a bunch of death threats. Bradley didn't really want to fight after, because he knew, I think, in my opinion, he knew he had lost the fight. And me being an asshole, I thought it was a draw. But nonetheless, it was a different transition, because it wasn't the same Tasmanian Pacquiao that we were used to seeing. And that's when the Marquez fight happened. And this, again, what is this? Shit. 2000... Let me check box record. Yeah, 2012. this happened. So again, it is what 3 years as a welterweight. So the Marquez fight happens. Marquez decides to go up another weight again to chase. In this case, Manny Pacquiao. So now this fight's at 47. Again, Marquez is always a small dude. So as a matter of fact, Marquez and Pacquiao always had the same frame, I guess you could say. But somehow now Marquez brought this strength and conditioning coach, and he's still around, Guru Science, whatever it's called. Memo Heredia, he's known for his memo shakes and, of course, for his doping scandals. But Marquez comes in, and I remember when I thought something was a little weird was when the actual weigh-in happened. Again, Marquez at this point had fought Floyd Mayweather at 147, so he decided to take a crack at the welterweight division. When Marquez fought Mayweather, Marquez looked soft, and understandably so, because he's moving up in weight. Again, he's Mexican, so there's going to be that extra carnita on the side. But at this time, Marquez actually just looked fucking yoked. He looked like he just got out of jail. I mean, he had jailhouse muscle. His back was big. His back was full of pimples, and that's when I'm like, maybe there's something to this Memo guy. And, you could always say steroids, but again, who knows? That's the same thing we could say about Pacquiao. But in this fight, Marquez was able to capitalize on Manny's aggressiveness at one point and ended up knocking out Manny Pacquiao. In this fight, again, this is 2012. Almost 10 years ago. This is 2012. In this fight, it was such a brutal knockout because of course, this is probably one of the most memorable knockouts for people that are alive right now, that, 20s, 30s, 40s, because we remember this shit. Actually, 30s and 40s, 50s and higher, because we remember this shit. Besides that's just the knockout. Besides the Paul Williams, I'm sorry, I was looking for the name. I was just going to say it. Because it wasn't. One, it was a beautiful knockout. Two, it was the way he got knocked out. He was irresponsive. He fell face first, and he was there for a few minutes in the ground, not responding to the commands. That's how ugly it was. Somebody from a knockout like this does not come back. But you see, that speaks of Manny Pacquiao's greatness. Manny Pacquiao not only came back, but he fought at that point, which was a monster after that knockout. Again, this is in 2012, so Manny Pacquiao pretty much took a whole year off. And who did he decide to fight? A monster that used to be 135 and 140, and now moving to 147 was Brandon Rios, another one of my all-time favorites. And yes, Brandon was I think the how can you say, the Arturo Gatti of our generation. He was face first type of fighter, so he was a perfect type of opponent for a guy like Manny Pacquiao. That's one is he's an ultra aggressive fighter, but also knows how to box when it's needed. So a fighter like Brandon Rios was a perfect opponent for a guy for Pacquiao. I'm sorry. And what ended up happening, this is when I knew that again, going back to Manny kind of scaling back, maybe pulling his punch a little more, he wasn't able to finish off Brandon Rios. Again, not that Brandon Rios was no pushover, but again, Brandon Rios is what he is. He's a fighter that can get hit and will get hit and enjoys getting hit. But he was never able to knock him out. The old Manny would have starched Brandon in 2-3 rounds. This time he decided to pull back, and that was interesting. Then after that, I think he got his confidence back in Macau, because I think that's where the Brandon Rios fight was, and he decided to take a crack at Bradley again, because at the end of the day, Bradley was the guy that quote unquote beat him. And when he fought Bradley, at this time the fight was more decisive. I think people got the right winner, and the almost rebuilding of Manny Pacquiao was officially started, because the rebuilding started with Brandon Rios and went towards Timothy Bradley. Of course, that's when he fought the Lion, which was Chris Algieri, that fight was in where was it? It was in Macau as well. And after the Chris Algieri, they needed a fighter that was fast, that was elusive, that was quick, that had good stamina, because they actually ended up finally doing the Floyd Mayweather fight. This is the fight that was supposed to define all boxing. This is the fight that everybody wanted. Everybody wanted the Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Manny Pacquiao. The thing is, with this fight, is that, yes, it was a box office breaking type of fight. It was probably one of the most anticipated fight of my generation, I would say. But the fact of the matter is that if we go back and look at Floyd Mayweather's career, there's always him fighting a fighter that one has already been beat, two that is already a blueprint on how to beat him, and three has been somehow altered. Yes, Manny Pacquiao has rebounded versus the Chris Algiers versus Timothy Bradley, done a fight with Brandon Rios, but let's not forget that he got knocked out on his fucking face by Juan Manuel Marquez in 2012. So in 2015, after all that, Floyd Mayweather finally decides that he wants to go again. When they go again, of course, we remember what happened. Again, nothing to take away from Floyd Mayweather. I mean, Floyd Mayweather beat him fair and square. The excuses came that something was wrong with of Pacquiao's shoulder and whatnot. Whatever, it happened. But again, it just shows you, people always say, oh, but who beat who? Look at the type of damage that Manny Pacquiao in 2015 had already done to his body when he finally got the mother of all fights, which was versus Floyd Mayweather Jr. Look how many times that he lost, how many times that he fought already. The times that, look at that fucking knockout. Nobody really comes back for those type of knockouts. That fight happened again. The Bradley fight happened again. He beat Bradley again. Then he ended up getting your basic opponent again, and it happens with getting a Jesse Vargas at this point, and this was again back in 2016. Jesse Vargas was a fairly fresh guy. As a matter of fact, Jesse Vargas is still pretty fresh as it is. He's taking very good care of himself, but again, Jesse Vargas at the end of the day is a C plus, maybe B minus type of fighter. After that, of course, he fought Jeff Horn, and that was the weird one because he ended up being a bit controversial. And again, that's just a Manny that in my opinion was out of it. He was just fighting to one, not to be impressive like he originally was, but to make that event, make that type of money, and take it back to his people. That's how he was fighting. He was allowing opponents to be in the ring with him, and he lost versus Jeff Horn. Again, Manny Pacquiao lost versus Jeff Horn. What happens after that fight? He ends up fighting Lucas Matisse. And that fight was interesting because Lucas, he was already a shell of him. So Lucas was one of the most powerful Argentinians at 140 and ended up moving to 147. But something wasn't right. Any time that the pressure got to him, he folded. I mean, he folded. And it's scary because I think Lucas was a much better fighter, a stronger fighter than Maidana, but somehow, some way, it wasn't it. It wasn't all power. And that's when and after that Lucas fight, I believe that was his last fight with Top Rank. He ended up moving with PBC, and again, let's think about this. From PBC, he had 3 fights, right? He had Adrian Broner, which is an easy fight for him. Keith Thurman, which most thought he was going to beat Keith Thurman. I mean, he was going to lose to Keith. I thought he was going to lose to Keith Thurman. And now versus Yordenis Ugas. And you know what? People talk about this Ugas fight and whatnot, but one thing we should take away is that, yes, he was supposed to fight Spence. So yes, Spence eye got damaged, but maybe, again, just maybe, Ugas was always the fighter that he was supposed to fight. Just think about it. Cuban fighters are not very liked by the boxing community in general. I mean, I'll be honest, including myself, I'm not big on the Cuban style. It's all, there's a lot of moving. Cuban fighters fight for themselves, not for the public, and I get it. That's what you have to do, and an amateur. But again, it doesn't bring eyeballs. Ugas is a little different because he will bang with you, he will fight, and he will box, which is important. He will fight your ass. But maybe those Cuban fighters needed a fighter, a good fighter, and I think Ugas is it. He's been getting on my damn nerves lately, because he hasn't shut up on Twitter about the win. But I think Ugas was the right fighter, because let's say if Spence would have been okay, the damage that a guy like Spence would have done to Manny Pacquiao would have been ridiculous. I think that version of Manny Pacquiao that we saw, even though he was competitive, because he was a bit competitive, I think he won 4 rounds out of the 12. So it's not like he got his ass wiped. So if he wins 2 more rounds, we got a draw. But it wasn't the Manny Pacquiao of yesteryear. It was not the Manny Pacquiao that needs to be with these big 147 pounders. Because if you really think about it, the great thing about Manny Pacquiao was that yes, he was small, but he was able to move in and out and not bang with these big guys. Now at the age of 40 something, what is it, 42, 43 years old, and banging with these, the Errol Spences, the Crawfords, the Ugases of the world, is not something that such a tiny guy should be able to put his body through. He's a tiny guy. He's a guy with 130 pound frame. He's not a big guy. So, in essence, I guess what I'm saying, I got a bit long-winded here, but it's special. I'm glad I got to see Manny Pacquiao fight. I'm glad I got to appreciate Manny Pacquiao. Again, I was just always so almost negative and disbelief over how this little fucking guy can go in and out and almost miss punches. For me to miss, as a viewer, miss the punch that he's hurting somebody with, and I wasn't able to see it till the replay and they slowed it down. That's how special Manny Pacquiao was. He was an instant replay type of fighter. He was the fighter that you got to enjoy while the actual fight, while they were resting in their in their corners in between rounds, because we had to go back and see how he actually landed that fight. Because if you kind of blink, you do not know how Manny Pacquiao landed that punches. It was that special. So to you, Senator Emmanuel Pacquiao, salute to you. Your 68 wins, 8 losses. I mean, those 8 losses don't mean shit. What a great fighter. And it's crazy because you see Manny Pacquiao, which I think is one of the last fighters that are cementing this type of legacy. But it seems like even us as boxing fans, we don't have a choice but to hang on to these type of fighters, because we're not seeing shit from our current generation. And that goes across the board. I don't see an actual fighter that I really want to, that I enjoy his career path. And I'm not talking about this fight or that fight. A fighter that I want to be a fan of, because, like, I'll give you an example, and I'll be straight out with you guys. I think a fighter like Ryan Garcia, his physical abilities are fucking amazing, and I would love to see him develop into a great fighter. Again, I don't care about the social media, none of that stuff, popularity, blah blah blah. I don't get to see that anymore, like we did with the fighters of yesteryear. I just saw Ryan Garcia post something about 2022 is going to be great. What the fuck? What the fuck? This is fucking August. What about fucking September, October, November, December? We still got plenty of times. We saw him fight in the beginning of the year, and that's it. Kid's giving away his prime. Gervonta Davis, great fucking fighter. But he hasn't fought absolutely no one. He's fighting all these weird catchweight fights at these mythical belts. That, by the way, he has to give back soon. Just because, again, it's an easy way to make a quick buck. But again, as far as bringing the excitement out of me, he doesn't, because again, he's not fighting anybody that should, anybody that deserves to be in the ring with a guy like Gervonta Davis. If anything, the Charlo brothers are the ones that are willing to fight equally matched fights right now. And that's crazy. It's the Charlo brothers. You got guys like Canelo that are chasing this legacy, but Canelo's chasing the paper legacy, which means he's trying to find not the best opponent, but the opponent that has a belt. Actually, now we know that he's signed to fight Plant sometime in, I believe, October, no, November, I believe. I get it. Plant's a solid fighter, but is he David Benavidez? Absolutely not. Is he Golovkin? Fuck no. So what are we going to see? We're going to see, you know what, somebody made a good comparison. I believe it was at Boxing Reloaded. When Chavez Sr. fought Hogan, I believe that was a unification. That was in the two-belt era. I believe this is going to be something like this, where if you guys remember the Chavez Sr. Versus Hogan fight, it was Chavez pretty much putting pressure from the very beginning to Hogan until eventually he broke his ass down. Same thing is going to happen with this fight. It's going to be a good fight if you're a Canelo fan and you like to see him whoop ass. That's cool. If you like to see competitive fights, this is not it. You're going to see a lot of running from Caleb Plant until Canelo finally breaks him down and he gets his big win. That's the type of fight that we're going to get. But again, back to my original point. Fighters of yesteryear are the ones that are still capturing our imagination till now. Again, Ryan Garcia is a good fighter. Canelo's a great fighter. Gervonta's a great fighter. Again, the excitement isn't completely there. The excitement is so not completely there that today, as a matter of fact, Oscar De La Hoya is doing a live training at Staples Center. That's how fucking crazy. And Oscar De La Hoya has been retired since what, 2012, I believe. Since he fought, again, going full circle, since he fought Manny Pacquiao. And now he's training for some sort of exhibition where there's a big dude, big MMA dude. Which, again, honestly, I'm excited for. Why? Because these type of fighters are the ones that you know, get the blood flowing. I love these type of fighters. The Oscar De La Hoyas, the Manny Pacquiaos, the Marquezes, the Roy Jones Juniors. These are the type of fighters that we enjoy to watch and that dare to be great. And yes, even at their, you know, tender age of mid-40s, you still want to watch them. You still want to watch Oscar De La Hoya. And I will go watch him, hopefully, on September 11. Kind of weird day to put a fight, but, you know, who knows? But anyways, I think let's talk about the fights that we actually have coming, because this is how crazy it is. This goes back to my original thought that fucking boxing, what we have going on, it sucks. Either it's old fighters taking advantage of the vulnerability of the boxing fan that's craving a good fight, or in this case, a guy that's a fucking YouTuber that's going to fight this Sunday. And I guess it serves as a good transition. Jake Paul versus Tyrone Woodley in an 8-round cruiserweight fight. So 8-round cruiserweight, that's no more than 200 pounds. So they must weigh in, what, at 200 or one? I believe it's 189 at the weigh-in. He's a YouTuber. 3 fights. Somehow he's capturing the imagination of these Yono Sabo fans that just want to watch a guy beat the shit out of another guy. And the thing is, he's finding these weird opponents. And kudos to Jake Paul and his team, because he's fighting the type of fighters that, one, have a name, that, 2, make you think like, oh, this guy might be the one that beats him, or this guy's going to give him a tough fight. This Tyrone Woodley, he's a MMA guy. From my understanding, he's a smaller guy. I think maybe middleweight. Please, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm out of pocket here. Maybe middleweight, maybe even welterweight type of fighter. So small dude, yes, and that's when, you know, size matters. Jake Paul's a big dude. He's a big fucking solid dude. He's gonna go in that ring, you know, at what, 210, 215, because, you know, he's got to hydrate the next day. So all he has to do is weigh $200. I'm sorry, 200 pounds on Saturday, and then he gets to rehydrate to whatever he wants to rehydrate to. These are the type of fighters that you know, unfortunately, yes, we might watch, but, and the reason why people are watching is because there's not shit in boxing that kind of gets blood flowing. In that same card, we got Amanda Serrano again, girl fight. You guys already know. I mean, I respect women boxing, but it's just not something that I'm going to want to watch. Again, there's a couple other fights and whatnot, but yeah, whatever. I guess the main thing is that you see how much boxing sucks. There's other fights here. There's Charles Conwell there versus Juan Carlos Rubio. Daniel Dubois fighting. Tommy Fury versus Anthony Taylor. Again, the biggest fight is a girl fight, and I don't care for it. That's how bad boxing is, guys. Maybe a little Debbie Downer type of a podcast, but still podcast that we have to do. I do want to come and maybe do something on Friday, maybe a Q&A. Let me know if you guys are up for it. Guys, thank you so much. Please make sure you go on my YouTube again as at Mr. Boxing Guru. Make sure you go on my YouTube, like it, and let's get this YouTube going, because I only got about 100 followers there, so I got to make sure we get to 1,000 so we get paid. All right, guys. Again, thank you so much. This has been the Mr. Boxing Guru podcast. Thank you so much. Y hasta luego.